I wanted to make it abundantly clear what this video is about before going into anything, because I realized that this could be something for some people that could be very triggering. And I will say it upfront and clear. This video is about the fact that I had a miscarriage 2 weeks ago. Part of this for me is to categorize my own feelings and my own thoughts. Anyway, my point being, I don't know how much detail I want to go into yet about what actually happened. So if any amount of detail talking about blood or anything like that is going to be traumatizing to you, please do not continue watching this video. Skip this one and just watch next week's video. I'm hoping to get back into the swing of things. If you don't know, I do curly hair content or healthy hair content, just how to get healthy hair. So I'm hoping to get back into that next week. So thank you for being patient with me. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started into this. I will be doing timestamps, so if anything is kind of triggering to you, you can kind of skip ahead. Back in mid-October, my husband and I found out we were expecting. We were both very excited about this news because for our first child, it took a decent amount of work to get pregnant. We had to take fertility drugs after trying for a year and a half. So this was a very big surprise to us when we were very excited. Done what most people do when they find out they're pregnant, start talking about the future. I had made a doctor's appointment as soon as I found out. I went in and they told me I was about 6 weeks pregnant. But it had a heartbeat, and so I was very excited. And then a week and a half later, I started to bleed. Now, that in and of itself is not necessarily a sign of anything. A lot of people have just a little bit of spotting. And at first I wasn't super concerned, but I was a little concerned because I didn't have that with my first pregnancy. So I did call my doctor. I explained to them that it was kind of just a brownish color. It was pretty light at that point. So they said if it increases, if it changes in color, call us back. It went like that for about 2 days. And then on day 3, it increased and it changed in color. It was now a brighter red. And I felt like I had to go to a heavier pad, but I don't think I mentioned it. But on the first day, they did tell me that if it starts to soak through 2 pads in an hour, I think it was, that's when you should start to be concerned and go to see your doctor. So I wasn't at that point yet, so I wasn't super concerned, but I think a part of me still knew. I had texted my sister and said, I think I'm having a miscarriage. I said I'm about 80% sure. The night went on. We were trying to be optimistic. We tried to just put it out of our minds. So we went to bed. Tried not to think about it too much. And the next morning I woke up feeling a squirt of blood, is the best way I can think of to describe it. I was still relatively asleep, so I didn't really think about it too much. And then it happened again. And then when it happened for a third time, I kind of reached down to feel, and I felt wet. So at that point I was very much awake. I hopped out of bed and I saw about this size spots of blood on the sheets. I called that to my husband and I rushed to the bathroom, and sure enough, I was bleeding relatively heavily. I had my husband throw away everything that I was wearing at the time because I just knew that I just didn't want to see it again. Because I think at that point I just kind of knew. And the thing that really told me what was happening was at one point after I had calmed down a little bit, my husband stepped out to call the doctor, and I wiped and I came away with a very large black blob. I bring that up for 2 reasons. One, because I think that was the point that I really knew. Just seeing it, it was about the size of a gumball, so it was very large. It was black, kind of gelatinous, and I think I just kind of knew. I just looked at it and I said, that was it. And the other reason I bring that up is because the doctor is going to ask you, did you lose any tissue? Did you pass any tissue? I didn't know what does tissue look like? How do I know what I'm passing? And is this tissue? I think that was tissue. So if you see something like that, a very large black blob, that's probably tissue. Anyway, so I saw that and I knew that was what that was. And that was very hard for me. I started to cry, and my husband came back in the room. He said that he talked to the on-call nurse and that they were going to pass it on to the doctor, and the doctor would call us back. After half an hour, we still hadn't heard from the doctor. And so at that point, I realized I needed to get up and I needed to stop sitting on the toilet, afraid of what was going to come. And I need to get moving with my day. So I put in a pad and I went to get my daughter up because she had been awake for a little while at that point. And I realized that a year and a half, she really just needed her mom. So we went about our morning like normal. And so after about another hour, I started cramping and my back started hurting, and I just, that part of it started to get worse, and they told us those were definitely signs of miscarriage, because what pretty much happens is your body's acting as if it's gone into labor. So I felt very heavy cramping, but it didn't really feel like labor to me. To me personally, it just felt like a very heavy period cramping. So we called back, and at this point I hadn't really checked in a while, but I still felt like I was bleeding pretty heavily. So we called the doctor back, and again, the nurse on call answered. She asked me at this point, "Are you feeling lightheaded?" And I said yes, but I wasn't 100% sure if it was because of blood loss or just, adrenaline, shock, there's a lot of things that could make you lightheaded. So I kind of hesitantly said yes, maybe just a little bit. And she told me to go to the ER. And that frustrated me a lot. And it also scared the crap out of me. And so I had hung up the phone, and my husband and I were talking, and I was panicking at this point, started crying. I was definitely in tears. So I called my dad and I told him the situation, and I called him in a panic, and he came racing down. And he, probably realizing we hadn't eaten anything, he also hadn't eaten anything. He picked up food for everybody on the way, and he got down as quickly as he could. And while we were waiting for him to arrive to watch my 1.5-year-old, me and my husband kind of just started talking, and we were like, this is not something we need to go to the ER over. At this point, especially after I had made the call, I went to the bathroom to check, and the bleeding had indeed slowed down. So we didn't feel it was urgent enough to go to the ER, not for the amount of time we would wait in the waiting room, and not for the cost. We're not going to pay thousands of dollars to go to the ER. So I called the doctor back, and I just made an appointment. I just said, I just want to come in. And so they scheduled me for that same day, just a couple of hours out. And my dad had arrived right about time for us to leave. So we got to the doctor, we waited in the waiting room for a little while, and they called us back, and they did the normal things they do with the doctor, checked my weight, all that kind of stuff. And then the nurse took us back to the room, and it was the same nurse that I had talked to on the phone, and the first thing she asked me is, the last time I talked to you, I thought you were going to go to the ER. What happened? I was just kind of in shock at her question. I was like, that's the first thing you ask me? There's no sympathy, no anything. It's just, why didn't you go to the ER? I was very frustrated at that point, so I just looked at her and said, I didn't feel like waiting in the ER for 5 hours was necessary. And she kind of just said, okay, and moved on. But again, there was just no sympathy. There was no anything. It was just very stern, very strict. They checked my hemoglobin. I was not anemic even, so I hadn't lost enough blood to be anemic yet. And so that right there just told me that we had made the right decision not to go to the ER. Luckily, the doctor was a lot more sympathetic. She came into the room, she did a brief exam, she did an ultrasound, and then she very calmly explained to us, she showed us the ultrasound, and she very gently, very kindly explains that we had lost the pregnancy. So she was very, very kind, and she explained to us that this is not uncommon. About 1 in 10 pregnancies end in miscarriage after a heartbeat is detected. And it's not anything that we did, it's just that sometimes something goes wrong with the process and it's not viable. So your body just loses the pregnancy. And the chances that it would happen again were very slim. And try not to beat yourself up over it, get support, get help if you can. And she was just very kind and very helpful. So I was very appreciative of that. And so she explained to us as well, the unfortunate thing about a miscarriage is your body does treat it as if it was a normal pregnancy. You go on, and if you've been pregnant before, you'll know this. If not, then this is new information to you, but you may suffer hair loss and you're going to bleed because your body needs to flesh out all the tissue and needs to shrink your uterus back down. So I think that was the hardest thing for me, was that I saw the evidence of it for about a week and a half after the miscarriage, just the continuation of the bleeding. You just get that ever-present visual of the trauma that you've gone through. So you've gone through the physical trauma and you've gone through the emotional trauma, and you get to continue to see it, which is definitely hard. All right, so I realized after kind of reviewing some of my footage from the other day that I didn't really talk about the aftermath. So I'm gonna try and trim down the previous video, maybe take out some of the details of everything. I am very open to questions. So if you have further questions, please leave them in the comments below. I will be happy to answer them. I'm pretty open about this entire experience. And that's part of the reason I wanted to film this video, was because I want to be open about this experience. It was just the week following, I think, was really hard. During the day when I was watching my daughter, for the most part, I kind of just felt numb. I really tried not to think about it too much because I knew I needed to focus on her and make sure that she was taken care of. There were a few times, though, I think that I completely disassociated. I remember sitting on the floor at one point and she started crying, and I don't remember what it was about, what caused it, why she was so upset. But she started crying and I just couldn't handle it, and I just shut down. And I'm pretty sure at one point my husband came in and took her away. I don't remember how long it had been. I had shut down. And he took care of things up until the point that I kind of could return to normal and kind of come back to the world, is the best way I can think of to describe it. After that, each day got a little bit better. I was able, after about a week, to start focusing back again and actually enjoying my time with my daughter. I think the hardest thing is the fact that you see the evidence of it for a week to 2 weeks following. But that did make it very difficult. Every time you go to the bathroom, you see the evidence of it, and it hits you every time, and I would avoid going to the bathroom because I didn't want to see it. I've gotten to the point, like I said, I'm about 2.5 weeks now out from it, that for the most part I'm okay. During the day, especially when I'm with my daughter, things are fine. I think having her in general has really helped. I think had it been my first pregnancy, it would have been much more difficult. There are a few things that I do want to talk about. One, I think, just very briefly, if you are experiencing this, if you want to see your doctor, just tell them, I want to see my doctor today. I think part of my biggest struggle with the whole thing was because I was told to go to the ER, I started to panic even more. It made the whole thing worse. And the reason they told me to go to the ER was because I think I was exaggerating it. I was so desperate to get in to see a doctor because I needed to know. I was afraid that if I didn't play it up enough, that they would say, okay, we'll see you next week. And I didn't want to live a week without knowing. So if you are going through this, just push to see your doctor. It's really hard in that time frame when you're bleeding and heavy bleeding like that, and the pain that you're going through, the panic already, the shock, to try to be honest with your doctor and actually see things realistically. But that's kind of my best advice there, is just make sure you're not exaggerating. And that's definitely difficult. Again, like I said, it's not easy. It's scary. It's very scary seeing that much blood. And then I guess I really just wanted to share this video with everybody because, I mean, part of the thing about this is that when we lose a loved one, when we lose a family member or friend, we reach out to people and we reach out for help. But I think a lot of people, when they have a miscarriage, don't want to talk about it. And if that's what you want, that's definitely fine. You don't feel the need to talk about it. It's not something you have to talk about with people if you don't want to. But I want to make it more, I want to be part of the conversation that makes it more okay if you feel like you need to reach out. You don't feel the shame. Because this is not your fault. This is not my fault. There's nothing that I could have done differently. So I think it's really important to keep that in mind and to just keep reminding yourself that there's nothing you could have done. But it just, the whole thing, it just really triggered at me, because I actually had someone tell me, I don't remember the exact wording, but they said something along the lines of, this must be so hard for you, especially not wanting to tell people about it. And I was like, why? What makes you just assume out of the bat that I don't want to talk about it and I don't want to tell people about it? And I think that really just kind of triggered me and set me off, because I really didn't feel that way. I didn't feel like it was necessary to hide it. But anyway, the last thing that I want to touch on really briefly here before signing off is, if you know someone who has gone through a miscarriage, reach out to them and see what you can do to help them, even if it's just someone to talk to, someone to distract them. And I am very appreciative that I had a lot of that. I had a lot of people reaching out to me, checking up on me, and making sure I was okay, seeing what they could do. And I am very grateful for that. But I think the one thing that a lot of us forget, and I'm guilty of this too, because I actually know several people who have gone through a miscarriage themselves, and this was something I never even considered. Check on the partner too, because they've gone through this loss as well. This is their trauma as well, and they're struggling as well. And not only that, yes, the person who lost the pregnancy has to go through the physical and the emotional trauma. Whoever lost the pregnancy, they definitely have it bad. But I still think that you should briefly check on the partner, because they have gone through the trauma. It was their baby too. They were looking forward to the future as well. And not only that, but they are in the situation of having to see their partner go through this. And that can be very hard, seeing your partner in that kind of situation, seeing them hurting, seeing them afraid, seeing them bleeding. That can cause its own trauma. So if you know someone who goes through a miscarriage, reach out to their partner as well, and just send your thoughts their way and make sure they're okay. I do feel like sometimes I struggle a little bit, feeling like I don't know if this is ridiculous to say or not, but I struggle with the concept that I don't feel like I'm grieving enough. And I think there are a lot of things that are kind of leading to that. Things like the fact that, like I said, I have another baby. The fact that it was a surprise pregnancy, we hadn't been struggling for months to get pregnant, and then we finally got pregnant, and then you lose it. It was a surprise to us. We had only known for a few weeks. But there is still that part of me that feels like I'm not grieving enough. So if you were in that camp, know that you're not alone. Everybody responds differently. Everybody has a different situation. Everybody has a different way of handling their grief. I just want you to know that it is okay to handle it however you feel you need to handle it. And I'm also very, very lucky in the fact that my husband's employer offers a certain amount. They will pay for a certain amount of therapy sessions every year. And in this scenario, I think my husband and I have both decided we are going to take part in that. We are going to take advantage of that. And I will say, if you have any way of doing the same, I definitely recommend it. I think even if you don't feel like you're grieving enough, like I am, a therapist can help so much. Or if you are really struggling with it, a therapist can help you to process it. So if you are going through this, if you have gone through this, I'm sending my love your way. Thank you so much for watching through this. I know this kind of ended up being a longer video than I intended. I do hope to get back to my normal content. I'm really hoping to kind of get back into the flow of things. I think at this point, getting back to normal is kind of what I need the most. So I'm going to try to film those, and I'm going to try to start releasing things every week again. Again, if anybody has questions, if anybody has thoughts, just be kind to one another, but feel free to leave them down in the comments. I will be happy to answer questions. Hopefully I will see you again in the future.